Okay, great. So let's get started. Okay, so before I get started, I kind of wanted to acknowledge the times that are happening right now. And it feels kind of weird to be doing my presentation, but hopefully it sort of touches on some of the things that are happening now and gives somebody or anybody a different perspective about how we can mobilize and do things. So I just wanted to acknowledge that this is a really important time in history, and I hope that we are all continuing to mobilize and support the Black community and the Black Lives Matter movement. And so I wanted to start off this presentation by just taking a small moment of silence to think about one way that we can support the Black community. And also another thing to think about is also how we're going to practice self-care so that we can be strong and supportive. So let's just take a moment. Okay. Just maybe a little bit more. Well, thank you all for doing that with me. It's a little bit weird because I can't see anyone right now, but I feel you with me. So thank you for doing that. Like I said, also I apologize. Whoa, don't know what's happening here. Also, I apologize if there are technical difficulties like the one you just experienced. Like I said before, I'm not very tech savvy. So yeah. So I'm going to talk about my project a bit, and I just wanted to let you know that all these pictures that you're going to be seeing in between the parts of me talking are sort of photographs that I took, and they were a part of the second part of my project, which I'm going to be discussing. And I'm going to be using them today as sort of like transition slides or just like pauses that we can like think about. They hold like larger and more significant meanings that I'll talk about later. But I'm sure by now you're kind of wondering what the heck my project is. So my project is titled From the Trees of Green Mangoes, and it's broken up into two parts. The first part is a documentary or video essay about the Cambodian artists in the diaspora. And the main anchor of this documentary or video essay is poet Makasuk. I hope I pronounced her name right. Who wrote the book A Nail the Evening Hangs On. Please go buy the book if you haven't already. It's a really inspirational book and it changed my life, and I really think it has poems that are, changing the world right now. So Monica and I had a lot of really great conversations about sort of the project that I was doing and the documentary that I was doing. And I think a lot of the work that I'm doing today is really inspired by her. And I want to talk more about this after the screening. So I'll just talk about the second part of my project now. The second part of my project is a performative interaction with food. And I wanted to start with the question of, can a food hold a culture? A lot of my interaction with Cambodia or the Cambodian diaspora and culture stemmed from my time in the kitchen with my mom and with my family. And I wanted to explore the concept of creation with food and how it is a tool that is used to preserve culture. I created a menu and switched out the pictures of food with symbolic stand-ins for things that were my own history. And I'll show you the menu as we get to it. And yeah, I think that having my mom and my sister interact with that menu and seeing these representations fostered conversations and led to really exciting and new things that I sort of didn't really expect. But it was a changing project, honestly, the second part of it, because coronavirus happened and a lot of my project had to shift. It was originally going to be an installation, but I'll talk more about that later. So just getting into it, here's the first part, which is the documentary.
The title of this poem is The Woman Who Was Small, not because the world expanded. The elephants came out from the fields and carried me toward Chambak, toward a village doused in fires, so that in the pond fish had fried, and looking at that dead water was a woman I had seen running home each evening with a bucket in her hand. Always her speed was the hair that flew in my face, always her feet sounding of tanks which made dogs bark and flee, footprints deep as trenches in the grass. This is the woman who has shrunk so small when the planes came, nobody could ever find her. And since more planes, she stayed as small as a spoon, and the world seemed to enlarge though nothing had changed. And when she saw me, she hid, threw pebbles at my ankles until I bowed down and easily picked her up, folding her inside a banana leaf. She slept well. She who is my mother, sleeping off the world again, whose person I hold in my hand when she wants to be held. I'm very curious about how poetry can push culture. We are tasked as poets to push language, and we all have something different to say. What I want to say is maybe different from what someone else wants to say. But I think what I have been trying to say lately is that Cambodian history is important, you know? And also our healing is important, but also our like wholeness is important. It's a different kind of survival, being in diaspora and trying to cling on to what you have of your culture and language. I definitely grew up with a lot of loneliness, even apart from the fact that I had such a strong family unit. When you're not on the soil of your ancestors' homeland, I think that's a really big part of longing and that loneliness. ABC for refugees. Cherubi D, how does a man who doesn't read English well know that Cherubi dumb? Those aren't really words, BD, but birds. Cherubi dumb, he stumbles, reading to me by the sliding glass door, Cherubi D, through which I watch my brother play in the dum-dum yard. Cherubi D, Cherubi dumb, like how my father says, fine then, leave. My mother shouts, stupid, dumb. We live in a small BD nest too. One hallway, two be dumb slam doors. Birds? What are birds? Thanks to my father reading with me, I have more feathers. T-H-E, first word he ever taught me to pluck. It is a word used all the time. Cherub, cherub, be dumb. The mail, the mailbox, the school bus, the. He asks me to read the mail, not birds, mail. If you don't read this, you will turn into birds. And I read it to him the best I can. The end. A feather, two feathers, the end. Mother, mother, repeat after me. Cherubi D, cherubi dum. We read together before bedtime. Sometimes a poem can survive for such a long period of time because it's the truth. So much of my own Cambodian American experience has been about like preserving my culture, preserving that Cambodian culture, Khmer language inside of me. And a lot of conversations I had with other Cambodian Americans is about preserving the culture or pushing the narrative, so that it's not just reduced to trauma or the genocide or even the temples, you know, like what's the next thing that people know Cambodia for? Right now it's about restoring our culture and preserving our culture and preserving like art and dance and things that have been lost in a way, but are not totally lost because we're still here, we're still alive.
Okay, I think I'm back now. Um, so yeah, first it's really exciting for you all to sort of like watch that with me. Many of you hadn't seen it. And thank you for my mentor Ashley, who's there, who's probably seen this so many times, even just, in the past couple days. But I guess before I get into the heart of it, I want to talk about why I pursued this project. And I think a lot of it stems from the picture that you're seeing right now. The joy that I learned from these two people who are the stars in my life that I always follow. Um, I just I just went back to some of the free writes that I wrote in the beginning. These were like reflections that I did throughout the quarter, but I went back to the ones I did in the fall as I was wrapping up this process. And this is what I said when I talked about the drafting of this process and making that doc. Um, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I feel myself getting closer to what I want to say, which is that I love my people. I came into this project by looking at my own identity as a Cambodian American artist, as the daughter of former refugees. And growing up, I didn't see a lot of representations of Cambodians or Cambodian artists. And as I got older, I started noticing that a lot of the stories were centering the war or trauma. And for me, that's a history that's obviously very, it's very personal to me. Sometimes it's a history that no one wants to talk about, and sometimes, and all the time, I think about it all the time. It's always in the background, and I think it's something that we should talk about. But I think for this project, I wanted to push the narrative a bit, and I wanted to explore and imagine what healing might look like. And so I wanted to recenter some of the Cambodian narratives that I feel like might be being lost. And I began to focus on the ways that we are existing and creating and preserving just by being in the diaspora and just by existing. Um, we're really powerful in that way. And I think this video essay attempts to document and archive what it means to be Cambodian American, what it means to explore intergenerational memory, what it means to be a person in diaspora, and what it means to be an artist. Um, so the main reason that I looked at artists in particular was because art has the power to move people. Art is how we find connection. And I think now more than ever, we should be in conversation with creation because art is everlasting. And Monica and I discussed this a lot, about what a poem can do. And in the doc, you hear her say that a poem can survive for so long because it's the truth. And I think something that I didn't include in the doc, but that I wanted to share, is that she told me about how poems have spirits and how they can reverberate through generations. And that feels really powerful to me too, to think about this everlasting quality of art. And so, because this is a sort of an honors in the arts project, and it's also academic and based on, um, you know, research questions, and like I don't know. I don't really like the term sort of like academic because it seems like there's something sort of like inaccessible about it. I don't know. There's something that's like rooted in power dynamics. Um, but I guess I don't know, what I think about is how academics, like what is academics other than being given the resources to pursue your endless inquiry. And what is art other than that same inquiry of trying to find ourselves and what we find ourselves in? I don't know, maybe that was like, sorry if that was like a little dramatic, but I think what I'm trying to say is that part of my research question about the piece was like archival history and how we remember things and the stories that we do decide to remember. And I think in this piece, I was trying to capture a lot of the small things of what it means to be Cambodian American, and what Cambodian culture is. And I think it is in those really like small moments of, sewing um, or just walking around, thinking about, putting pen to paper, these sorts of like things of just like creating and of being. Um, and so, yeah, I don't know. That research question that I kind of started with, I think about how a question is, or how a question can open a lot of different doors, but how a question can also be a point of mourning. Because I think about how there are so many things about Cambodia that I don't know, and there are so many things about Cambodian culture that I don't think I'll ever understand. Um, and my education for, a long time didn't center the importance of keeping these traditions alive, or what those traditions even are. So I think I go back to this idea of art is a way that we find each other, and it's a way that we learn about community and how to look after each other, and also how to look for ourselves. Um, and I found everybody in the documentary through art, actually, and through my love of art. And yeah, they were all people that I met on this artist journey, and we learn about heritage and community that way, and we hold ourselves through art. Um, so, okay, so um, we're going to transition now into the second portion of my project. And like I said before, the second portion of my project focused on performative inquiry of food, um, and putting food into conversation. So growing up, I found solace in the kitchen when I cooked with my mom, or when I cooked for my sister, or when we went to go eat at Cambodian restaurants. And I think for me, it was a home inside a home, because Cambodian food is something that we celebrate. Um, and it's something that is made with like a lot of tenderness and a lot of love, and it's something that is passed down, and it's something that's ours and that we understood. Um, so I created this menu, um, and as I mentioned before, all of these are symbolic representations of sort of things that are really pertinent to my life. And so I wanted to look at this idea of culture and of food, and how it represented and documented and translated, and how it's like enjoyed, all these things. And I thought a lot about how in Cambodian restaurants, or maybe even more broadly Asian restaurants, there are a lot of images that go with the food, and how, some of the names are like translated in these things like that. And so I wanted to play with this idea a little bit. And originally, when it was the installation, it was going to be a menu of questions, like questions like what consists of a home, that people would sort of have, would interact with, and would maybe think about and would discuss. Because when you go into restaurants, there's a lot of discussions and like discourse, and you're eating a meal and you're gathering. But I also just, there was going to be no food inside that installation, with those questions. So I was playing with this idea of fullness and absence. Um, but because I'm home, and with my family, I decided to tailor it a little bit more to them, and to discuss these symbolic meanings and translate these images into stories that are sort of discussed as we made food together. And I think, oh, well, I have to give a shout out to my sister for helping me interview our mom. You can probably hear them screaming in there. And my sister helped me interview my mom, and gather and document these stories and these snapshots of the diaspora and the individual and collective experience. And it was really, really cool to create something with them. So one of the most like fun moments was sort of, as I said, documenting these things, and I just want to share a couple clips.
Because of the fact that we come from another country. A lot of things that are still unacceptable, like divorces and a woman being totally independent and not being with her husband, not supporting her husband. So the role of a wife is to be by the side of her husband, supporting him, whatever the husband's business is. And now it's, with you younger generation, it's moved away from that. But before, and arranged marriage is, the idea is you learn to love your husband over time. So
would you say there was a lot of
I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You know, I think if you were raised in the old country, people accepted a whole lot more and was more patient with all that they had to be patient with. Like, I think it was just a shameful thing if you didn't, that you had to tolerate, your husband cheating on you, having mistresses and whatever, and but now it's a different time. So, but yeah. And even as the time change, you can still incorporate, the old traditions with the new. You don't lose it, you just add to it. And you don't ever forget where you came from. Okay, go ahead, taste it.
It was really spicy. Right after my sister ate that, she was talking about that for a while. So I always kind of like smile when I watch that clip back. Um, yeah, so I think that clip and listening to my mom's words showed me that we are still weaving our histories together. And a lot of that starts in the home and talking with our parents or elders or other people in the community who we find family in, who can help us sort of understand ourselves and where we came from. And I think it showed me a lot about the way my mother has made paths for me in coming here and illuminated topics that I'm always thinking about, such as like culture or womanhood, and how we can rethink that, reimagine it, keep pushing it, redefine it. And I think a lot about how this clip relates to the first part of my project. And in that, in the first like segment or the first part of the project, you know, I think a lot of it talks about how people have like paved ways for the second generation to be here. And I think about the ways that the second generation is paving a new language for generations to follow, and for new ways for us to continue to explore being in diaspora. And in these interviews, I think about the way that my mom was sort of able to build a life here in a place where she was unfamiliar about the language and how hard that must have been, and also how strong she must have been. Everything I say here today is because of the things that she, my dad, and the rest of my family did for me. And I carry them with me every single day. And it's kind of funny, like, as I say that, like, say all these nice things about them because they're like in the room next to me and I can like hear them chanting. So I don't know. Yeah, it gets me like emotional. um, Anyways, there were also things that I found to be sort of really surprising in listening to these clips. So this is sort of one of the surprising things that I learned. Oh, geez. Okay, here we go.
It's brand new. It wasn't an old house. We had it built.
Oh, you had it built?
We picked the lot, which Grandpa didn't like because we picked it only three houses in from the main road. And Grandpa goes, that's too close to the main road. People can come rob you more easily. But yeah, it was an empty lot.
I didn't know you built it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really surprising. I didn't know that that was sort of like the history of the first home that I grew up in. And I think it's really like interesting to hear sort of about the way that my family moved through the world and how they were literally building and what they were worried about and just like sort of like why they chose specific areas and these things. And I think that also ties me to how I am, you know, in lineage with them. And I always feel a strong connection to the story of how I came to be here today and how a lot of where I am today is dependent on the paths that they made for me. So yeah, I'm laughing at this picture just because it was really funny to watch them be in such like tandem parallels. Okay, so the last thing that I want to talk about is how the project changed. So I'm just gonna show a clip and then talk about a little bit how the project like changed because I think that's important to talk about too.
When we first came, well, we didn't have any skills. So your uncles went to learn how to bake donuts, and we ended up getting public assistance for a few months until they gained the skills, and then they started baking, earning money, so then we got public assistance. And then everybody like pulled their money together and bought the first donut shop that everybody worked at.
What was the name of your first donut shop?
Christie's Donuts.
Oh, was it that one?
On Bristol Street in Santa Ana.
So I know that might seem totally random that I included this segment about donut shops, but actually part of the original conception of the project was hopping around to different donut stores, donut shops, and making a photography like book or project. I don't know the words right now. So just like documenting all the different signs of different donut stores and interviewing the people who own them and hearing their story about how they came to these donut shops. For some of you who may not know the history of donuts in Cambodia, there is a tie there. And a lot of donut stores are owned by Cambodian people. And there's a lot of history and a lot of stories in them. And so that's kind of why I wanted to sort of include that. And it makes me really happy that that was kind of organically brought up because my mom also owned a donut shop too. Shout out to Donut Wheel in Tucson, Arizona. And so I think it's really like lovely how that ended up making its way into the project too, even though, you know, I wasn't able to go do it in this original way. So that's kind of it for this presentation. I think it's been an experience that has been immensely meaningful to me. And I keep finding ways to express how much I love the Cambodian community and honestly how much I love my family, just because I bring them with me and all my friends that I meet in the diaspora who also, you know, support me in my journey. And I kind of just wanted to end, you know, this presentation with this picture because, as I say, like these are the two people that sort of taught me a lot about joy. So that's it. I'm gonna stop my screen share. Okay, now I can see everyone. It's really exciting. So yeah, before we get into Q&A, I just wanted to say thank you to my family and also especially to Monica, who literally spent so many hours with me as I was documenting this like journey and making this film. And you know, I owe you immensely, and I'm so happy to be in community with you. And yeah, you just made this possible by the way that you support me, and I'm so thankful for everybody in the crowd. Thank you so much for coming here tonight, and I have to say thank you to HIA for giving me this opportunity to do this. I think the combination of everyone's support, my family, my friends, everybody, you know, you all gave me the confidence to pursue things, and if it weren't for you, I, you know, I wouldn't be creating these things. And thank you for teaching me the power of narratives.